You work for the NHS. You've had a great idea, you've made it happen, and it's made a big difference to how we can learn from COVID-19 and enter a new normal. Ideas like yours drive improvement and they deserve to be shared. That's what BOB does. Amplifying good ideas like yours across the NHS so as many people as possible can learn from, adapt and implement your idea. The further good ideas are shared by the BOB community who learn from them, the greater improvement we can achieve. You made a change. Share your solution with others. Speak to BOB.
So with us today, we've got a brilliant panel of speakers who I'll let introduce themselves properly shortly. But we have Dr. Naj Rotherham, Medical Lead Partnerships with Boehringer Ingelheim. We've got Conran Dobtret, he's Head of Customer Solutions and Health Innovation at Biome and Novartis Biome. Dr. Miles Furness, the Global Digital Health Partnerships Lead at Ipsen. And we have Catherine Brandt, Senior External Relations Manager from Novo Nordisk. And finally, Daniel Giesels, who's Head of Lung Cancer Franchise Europe from Canada, and he's from AstraZeneca. So you can join the conversation on social media. So our hashtags are Giant2020 and hashtag UnpackTheHow. And via the question tab on the right-hand side of your screen, you can kind of let us know any questions that you have. And by the end of the session, we should all leave with some practical advice for SMEs looking to collaborate with the pharma industry, and also for pharma companies who are looking to hear how their colleagues have successfully collaborated with SMEs, and in some cases, even global companies that are partnering with startups. So we should have a poll on the right-hand side to find out where our audience are from. So if you're joining us in the audience, if you could just click on the right-hand side on the poll button, and there should be an option for you to let us know where you're joining from. And while you do that, we'll find out a little bit more about the speakers that we have. So maybe if Catherine, we could start with you. If you could tell us who you are, where you're joining from, and we appreciate how busy things are at the moment. So if you could let us know why you've chosen to clear your afternoon to join us today.
Okay, thank you, Bernie. Yes, so I'm Catherine Brandt and I work at Novo Nordisk. I've been at Novo Nordisk for 7 years now. And actually, my background is as a nurse, and I've still got my nurse registration currently. And my background is as a diabetes specialist nurse. So some of you may or may not know Novo Nordisk is a company with expertise in diabetes, and specifically in producing insulins and other medicines for people with diabetes. And so I felt able to bring my expertise and knowledge of diabetes into a different world, and actually now I work in public affairs and external relations department, so I'm able to think about some of the challenges that I experienced in 20 years working in the NHS, and hopefully work to try and address some of those. And I think why I've chosen to come today is because collaborations externally are such an important part of my role. In fact, they're probably the most important part of my role. And I think where I see industry as having a really important role is to be able to pool expertise with then external organisations to be able to move together. And in my world, it's about trying to improve outcomes and lives for people with diabetes. And as part of my role, I've been working with a few medtech companies. So hopefully I'm able to just share a few of my experiences today that I've had, and also get across the potential of working together, and how working together is so much greater. Actually, we can achieve so much more than when we try and do it independently. So thank you for inviting me.
Of course, thanks for joining us. Thanks, Catherine. Miles, over to you.
Thanks, Bernie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Miles Furness. So I'm the Global Digital Health Partnerships Lead at Ipsen. I'm a physician by training, so I worked in the NHS for about 5 years, finishing up in a rare area in oncology before moving into industry, where I've worked in commercial, medical, and now global digital roles as well. Passion is very much digital health and really trying to drive this cultural transformation of traditional-based medicine. And this is particularly important for me, particularly with industry. And there's a lot of opportunity here where we need to collaborate much more, bring it together, and try and progress healthcare in a more positive manner. So this is my third time at Giant, and the reason why I love it so much is because it really does bring this intersection of industry, tech, innovation, accelerators, the academic side, the NHS. It's got this beautiful spread, and it really emphasizes exactly what we're trying to do here. So I'm really happy to be here, and thank you so much for the invite.
Great, thanks so much, Mile, and welcome back to Giant. So Conrad, over to you.
Hi everybody, my name is Conrad Dobschütz. I work for Novartis in the UK, and I'm the head of digital innovation, custom solutions, and I also lead the biome in the UK. I'm here today because I not just in my remit as a biome lead for the UK, and I'll explain a bit about the biome later, what it entails. But I'm also here because I've got a really good interest in digital health and how we can really empower patients, number one, to own their own data using technology, but also how we can better collaborate across industries and within the healthcare sector as well. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion, and thank you for having me today.
Brilliant, we look forward to it too. Thanks, Conrad. Nad, hello.
Hi, Bernie. Hi, everyone. So my name's Nad Rotherham. I'm part of the medical team at Boehringer Ingelheim. My role is medical lead for partnerships. And the partnerships are really externally focused. So they're with the NHS, but also with innovators. And I link to our global innovations team. So the innovators are global. I think the timing of this session is perfect. I think towards the end of the year, it's always a period where we do a bit of natural reflecting, but it's also been quite possibly the most transformative year, I think, for healthcare under extreme pressure of the global pandemic. But still, I think that there's so much change to learn from. And to share experience about that can hopefully take us and move us forward in future years. All obviously aimed at trying to improve outcomes for patients, but also improving the quality of their lives too. I think it's really important. So thanks for inviting me.
Of course, thanks so much, Nad. That's great. And last but not least, Daniel, lovely to have you with us today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Gissels, and I'm the head of the lung cancer franchise here at AstraZeneca, based in Switzerland. We work with all European and the Canadian markets, and of course, we try to eliminate cancer as a cause of death, transform life of oncology patients. But the reason why I'm here, and it's my first time at Giant, and why I was interested to participate is because we made recently experience with working together with small and medium startups in a project called Haya, and I will discuss this with all of you in one of the next topics. But we partnered with key scientific societies, patient advocacy groups. We addressed patient leakages in the patient journey. We did some healthcare incubator type of things to come to a point where we were able to execute Haya in 4 to 5 months, and to was previously said, it was a very unprecedented year in all of the aspects, and therefore I wanted to learn from all of you and from the interactions here, but also to give something back what we learned working with small and medium-sized startups and health and tech companies.
Brilliant. Well, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm really pleased to say that actually we've got a really wide mix of people in the audience, from startups, scale-ups, and fellow pharmaceutical colleagues, and also tech and NHS backgrounds. So welcome everyone. And I think you've already touched on some of the things that you're working on, but the speakers on this call are coming from some companies that are doing great work in this space with SMEs. So just keep an eye on the chat on the right-hand side of your screen, and some links to what they're working on should appear shortly. So I thought it'd be good just to kick off with a really general question that I know a lot of people ask, and it's who should people contact? So say there's a small startup and they're kind of new to this area, who is the best person to contact if they think that they've got something that you might be interested in collaborating on with them? So maybe Conrad, do you have any thoughts on kind of who's the best person, the best port of call to start with?
Sure. I mean, I would be remiss of me not to talk about the Novartis biome at this stage. So the biome, number one, is all the bacteria in our gut, right? This is where the word comes from. But it's a global network of innovation hubs, really. It's not an accelerator, not an incubator, but it's something that Novartis has set up to really act as almost as a door for people to come engage with Novartis, and for Novartis to seek engagement as well. So I would, number one, we have a website going live fairly soon, which is biome.com, where the UK is featured in particular. And on there is a contact. So for people to get in touch with me, because I'm leading the UK biome currently as a one-man band, but we're planning to extend this as well. And the other piece is really trying to participate in industry challenges, in NHSX challenges. So there is a whole variety out there where, no disrespect, but a simple Google search will do you a lot of favors, and trying to find that into those. It is difficult to get into life sciences companies in particular by just like emailing or reaching out on LinkedIn, because I have 20, 30 messages each week on LinkedIn, and trying to decipher which ones are good or not good is almost impossible. So a more structured approach, trying to seek these challenges and applying for them, from my end, makes much more sense.
Thank you, that's really helpful. And Naj, I wonder if you have any thoughts to add to that, and also whether there's a particular time when people should be contacting teams like yourselves.
No. So, I agree with what Conrad has said. I think looking out and searching for those opportunities and being more directed. But I think also, it isn't a one size fits all. I think, and if you have a way in or a contact in a company that use that to ask them to help you identify the right person to find within the organization. So I think, that is also a possibility.
Naj, if I could just stop you,
I think what's really important, though, is...
Sorry, if I just stop you before we go on to the next point. I think we're having a bit of technical issues. Yeah. So we've just been asked to pause for one moment, and then we can pick right back up from where we were. We'll get the go-ahead.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
It's bound to happen, isn't it? You were just about to kind of continue Conrad's discussion, so let's pick that up again. So who and when should people talk to in pharma when, a small startup or scale-up is looking to kind of get going on a collaboration?
So I would say they should keep trying and keep talking. Timing's a very changeable thing on the industry side, and you could approach at one time and get a no, but you could try again 6 months, 9 months, a year later and get a yes. So I think, my key, I think, would be persistence and passion pays off. So keep trying. Although I agree with Conrad, looking out for things on the internet, links, things on social media is a good route in. I think also use conventional LinkedIn, emailing, contacting teams, anyone you might know, and they should really direct you to the right person. But for that to happen, you really need to be very clear about what you're offering or what your innovation is and how you see it bringing value. Clearly, then it should find its way to someone who's interested. Persistence
Persistence, that's the takeaway. And I guess just to touch on a point you mentioned there, kind of, and I guess this is kind of an open question to all the speakers. Miles, I know you might have some thoughts on it in particular. In when people are pitching their solution to teams like yours, what's some advice that you can give them to kind of get that time, that moment in time where they manage to capture your imagination and capture your kind of attention? How can they grab it and make sure they keep it and communicate their solution well to you?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, there are so many different companies and startups doing all these amazing different things, right? A lot of it, I see the pitch is very much directed towards that kind of VC pitch. And you then ask the question, like, give it some thought. Who are you trying to target in pharma? If pharma's going to be, you know, your revenue generation, great. Which bit? If it's GMA, Global Medical Affairs, or HEOR, or commercial, okay, great, commercial. Which bit of commercial? And is it going to be local? Is it going to be global? What sort of problems are you trying to solve for them? And try and focus that solution that's really guided by what they want to hear, that they know they can resonate and understand. Oh, great, this can really help me in this space. This can really help me solve this problem in a new and innovative way. But it's trying to translate it in a way which they can really grasp that. If you go in with a very top line vision, which is great and I love it, but it's going to be lost on a lot of people, and they're not going to be able to really translate that into, okay, well, how can I get this into my business plan over the next 12 months? How is that going to help me meet my objectives? How is that going to help me help my patients? How is that going to help me do this, that, and the other? It's just refining it a little bit for your audience, for your customer, and I constantly see that all the time. So it's just giving that polite guidance as to say, well, actually, if you word it like this, it makes a lot more sense to your audience, that is industry. And then they're going to be more likely to be able to say, okay, great, how can we refine this? You can build on that in over time, of course you can, but it's just getting that first foot on the door, and so it's just really thinking, how can I help them?
I think that's really helpful, good practical advice that we can all take on board. Bob is a startup too, so this is very helpful, and I hope it is for our audience. And Catherine, I think you may have some thoughts on this. I know you've recently worked with a smaller medtech company, so any insights you can share on what kind of worked well in their kind of collaboration with you and how they communicated their solution?
Yeah, and I think building on what Miles has said as well, in top line, yes, that's going to be too broad, but actually going in with a really clear level of detail that might not, and that just be prepared to move away from that really fixed level of detail, because actually sometimes industry and we can work together to build what's needed. So don't be too fixed with your ideas. And one thing, example that we did quite recently, actually, which happened this year, and I think this is just a really good example of how many of the challenges that we might get time to talk about some of them today, but some of the challenges of working in partnership at all, but working in partnership with pharma, some of those challenges can be overcome when there is a real desire and a real passion to want to make that work. And I think that if the passion comes through really clearly and strongly, then that goes an awfully long way as well. And then just briefly, the example we had was in the pandemic, as I said, my field is diabetes, and we actually managed to come together with NHS England, the clinical director at NHS England, and then together with Diabetes UK, so obviously a very large charity, and also with MedCrowd. So MedCrowd are a sort of a med tech company who've been working in other areas, but we actually came together to be able to set up a helpline for people with diabetes who might need to access help, and they couldn't actually get it in the usual routes through the NHS. So the collaboration was obviously a number of different partners coming together, and actually to overcome being able to set up a digital helpline which was routed through Diabetes UK, and then went to MedCrowd, the medtech company, and to actually get that from idea to completion and kickoff was actually less than 2 months. So I think that's a massive achievement that happened right in the middle of the pandemic. And the overriding reason why that was successful is because there was a clear need for it to happen, and everyone involved in it really wanted to overcome all those obstacles. So it is possible. But perhaps things might be possible in a pandemic time. They might actually be more simple than sometimes happening outside. But I think persistence, as we've heard earlier, is really, really important in that too.
Well, that's great, and congratulations. That is an incredible achievement. So well done to the whole team involved in that. And I think, Daniel, you've recently been working with some smaller teams too. So I wonder if you've got some advice based on your experiences with them on things they did well in pitching into your team.
Yeah, without repeating what the colleagues have been saying, I think it's really critical, and we did that back in March when we assessed several patient journeys, and it seems to be obvious, but it isn't at all. It's putting the patient in the center of the idea and really go back to the mind of the patient, the setting of the patient, and the patient care pathway, which we think we all fully understand, but when you go to deep patient insights, you really get to the point where you can come closer to the patient and the patient environment and the informal caregiver. And to what Miles was saying, define well the leakage and the problem you'd aim to solve for. That's really critical in what we did. For instance, with Haya, the patient care management platform, where we try to connect seamlessly HCPs and patients, where we try to solve for proximity of care and open conversations between in the healthcare ecosystem, and way beyond the pandemic. It was something that we accelerated during the pandemic, but we thought of before the pandemic. The second thing for me, which is critical, working together, what small and medium-sized companies can do, working together with medical device companies, pharma companies, and other partnerships, is really thinking how to collab and co-develop the solution. Because to my experience and my knowledge, having implemented with markets, patient support programs, platforms, etc., is really the co-labbing element is making the difference. It's rare that a solution that has a certain extensive maturity will be easy to install in markets, in hospitals, in healthcare centers, will get the endorsement of patient advocacy groups and scientific societies, because market by market, the needs are so different, the healthcare systems are so different, especially in Europe. And the third thing, which is, I think, very important for small startups to think about, is how to anticipate key trends. And it's very difficult to define key trends in healthcare, but the ones that predict key trends are the ones that are also very successful. And an example of a key trend is, we all read about the cumulative annual growth rate of real world evidence data or patient reported outcomes. There is a value for healthcare centers, key scientific societies, and even reimbursement bodies to know more of what the real world evidence and the clinical data practice of the drugs patients are needing is. And what we try to address as well with the example I already mentioned, Haya, the connected cancer care platform, is we try to collect, at the one hand, the data at care center level and combine this with some key features that are really important in the care trajectory in oncology, and we try to combine them in one platform through one single interface at patient and HCP level.
That's really helpful. I think we've got some really great insights there for, as I said earlier, we've got a range of people in the audience from startup scale-ups, but we also have quite a few people from pharmaceutical backgrounds. So it would be really good now if we could kind of move on to advice that you would give to your pharma colleagues for how your company or companies that you know of are working well with smaller teams. I think there's a bit of feedback on one of the microphones. So maybe if we're all able to just mute, I think that should help. But I think, yeah, it would be helpful to just kind of share some of the things that you've learned and the challenges your company has overcome from working with SMEs, to kind of smooth out those kind of practical processes that we might not necessarily think of when we look to start a collaboration. So Naj, maybe if you're able to share your insights from a Boehringer Ingelheim perspective, that would be brilliant.
So from the way we approach it at BI, it's very much about how an innovation, whatever that might be, fits into a patient journey. It fulfills, as Daniel said, it fills a need. It's going to have an impact. And so it doesn't always have to deliver the complete story, but you have to be able to define and see where it's going to fit in a more comprehensive and holistic way within a system or within a patient pathway. So yeah, that would be kind of my advice about how you could find a place for innovation.
Thank you. And any advice from any of our other speaker panels that you'd like to talk to on this side of things? So advice for fellow pharmaceutical colleagues?
Yeah, happy to from my end. For me, it's just being a bit more open-minded. This is a really new space and a really new approach to health. And we're coming at it from a lens which is a very traditional mindset, generally speaking, within industry that's been embedded for decades with a consistent business model that really hasn't changed that much over those decades. And all of a sudden, we've got all this innovation in healthcare. And it's not just us, it's all external stakeholders that it's really starting to show a glimpse as to, oh, we can start doing these things that we've never been able to do before. Maybe even prediction, for example, helping diagnosis, personalizing medications, a completely new area. And for me, it's actually going to have to start, well, it's going to start redefining the business models eventually, it has to. And this is one of the challenges. I think, are constantly trying to fit innovations in to what we know and to what the business model is, rather than to really sort of expand what Nadia was saying as well, around, okay, well, how can we help that patient pathway in a way that we've not been able to do before, but actually will have a huge impact to our customers, to our patients. And some of that's really new. And I think one of the things that Ipsen's done really well we've approached this with a really open mindset. And yeah, it's been challenging. I think it's challenging everywhere because the landscape is so rapidly changing. There are so many different elements to it. Daniel's just mentioned about real world evidence. Amazing, huge scope for opportunity in trials, in additional submission possibilities for publications, understanding the disease areas better. The regulators are really forward thinking on that, but we're still like defining as to how we can fit that into the organization in more effective ways across the scope, I think. How do we try and bring in these other solutions that are doing something that actually we've never done before, but it makes a lot of sense for us? It's very, very different. So for me, it's trying to think about that open-mindedness and be willing to learn and understand how this is changing and how it's really going to fit into healthcare, not just pharma, but into the system itself. And I think it touches again on the multi-collaboration piece that we've also discussed. For me, it's almost turning on its head and really prioritizing patient, doctor, healthcare system, and then us, not the other way around. And that's really difficult sometimes to actually try and justify that from a business case perspective. But if you kind of see what a lot of startups and health tech innovations are doing, it's very much taking that approach. How do we align more with that? It's kind of really asking that question.
That's a really interesting point. And I think there does seem to be quite a lot of themes in kind of the conversation we're having from both sides. So advice for SMEs, but also for pharma colleagues. And I think there's just one more question I'd like to ask in terms of advice you'd give to your peers, and then we'll move on to some audience questions. But we've heard that actually, from global pharmaceutical companies to, the smallest of startups working together, it actually is or can be a cross-onboarding process. So even the largest companies can learn small things from the smaller companies and vice versa. So I'd be interested to hear if there's any sort of kind of surprises or, things that you've learned that you'd like to share with the audience that actually you've learned from these smaller companies and the way that they work.
Yes, I can give it a...
Yeah, I might go. Oh.
Okay, so we'll go Daniel and then let's move to Naj. Let's go that way.
Sorry.
No worries, thank you.
I think you ultimately combine the best of both worlds. The companies might have a difference in terms of speed of developing ideas, sprints, open innovation. The way they partner with other companies might be very inspirational and was in the past very inspirational and is in our current partnerships inspirational for us. And what they taught me is you don't need the full ID, the full product to test the value. That's really one thing I need here to point out, because what we do in big pharma is really develop an ID, minimal viable product, add a lot of features, being biased about our own beliefs, and then push a very mature product. But you don't need that. The other thing they can teach you, and where I'm very grateful to partner with smaller and mid-sized companies, is you have a wealth of what Miles and previously was said. You have a wealth of new platforms, new techniques, new solutions you are even not aware of. So we enriched our platform in oncology. We enriched that. We had a minimal viable product in March. We partnered with small startups, and we enriched it at least with 3-4 features we were not aware of, which is a tremendous effort from our partners. And one last thing to mention is what they taught us as well in the past, working with us, is that a startup is not a small business. It's a face of a business. It's not the size of a business. So it has a huge potential, and you can see that. And when you fully deploy that, you can reveal the potential. So the think big, start small, scale up is really something you know conceptually, but you only can live when you partner with smaller startups. So at the end, we needed 4 to 5 months. Previously, some of the colleagues were mentioning 2 months to go to the end product. We needed for the oncology platform for Haya, we needed 4 to 5 months from the start of the conceptual phase to the launch, which was last month. So you can learn a lot. They taught us a lot. And to summarize, it's speed. It's not the end product or the maturity of the product that counts. It's really the collabing. And the size of the business can be huge. So the potential can be huge.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much. And Naj, I think you were going to pick up on what Daniel was touching on there.
I agree. I was going to talk about the co-creation and really getting started and being iterative, learning from direct experience and feedback. And actually, I'd maybe reflect back on you, the way BOB's established itself as a new small business, and how you've grown over the last year by listening and collaborating. And I think that's really key, is not to, as Daniel said, come out with a final product, but be very clear about what your vision is, what you're trying to achieve, and stick to that, not get distracted, and just learn in the process and grow in that process. Yeah.
I think if that's all right, just one very quick thing I would say about what you learn as well is that in the pharma industry, necessarily, we have very clear frameworks for our ways of working. And sometimes we get so tied up in those, we can't actually see how to move forward. And then you sort of have a company that comes to you with this idea and you feel it's a really good idea. And I've had a company actually say, well, I don't understand. Why do we have to do this? And it just encourages you to take a different approach, not to change things, because we work within our framework and that's absolutely necessary. But it just moves you in a different direction so that you can actually have that clarity of how to move forward. And that if there is a really good idea and it's right for us and it's right for the company for us to support each other in it and to move forward, then there will be a way that we can make it work from a compliance perspective. And I think sometimes we're so rightly concerned about compliance that we can't actually see how we can move forward. And I guess that's just about talking to the right people. If it's not you who's got the expertise in your company, but you're really passionate about working with this medtech company, then get someone in who does have that expertise and find a way forward. That's certainly something I learned in one of the projects I can remember clearly.
I very much echo that, Catherine. That whole, once they've got a solution, you think that's what we want to do. You find a way to navigate through that you can do it in a compliant and safe manner. Otherwise, you just wouldn't have thought about it at all.
And I guess that ties in with what Daniel was saying, that, if you kind of come with the finished product, then if there are any of those last minute tweaks that maybe do need tailoring slightly to kind of meet the needs of some of the compliance side of things, then you've kind of got that room to make those changes. So I think that's really helpful advice for the people listening. And we have some questions that I would love to ask you. So one of the questions is from Sabias Ghosh, and he said, as pharmaceutical companies, which type of innovation would really appeal to you? Is it reducing the drug development timeline, patient adherence, earlier diagnosis or anything else. So maybe Catherine, given your background in the NHS, it'd be good to kind of get your thoughts on that as a starter, and then we can kind of go around the panel and see what your thoughts are.
Okay, thank you. I mean, rather helpfully, I'd probably say all of them. I think we would be interested in that at all levels, and obviously the size of the project is going to determine how easy that would be to move it forward. From my perspective, I'm very much involved with people living with the condition of diabetes and how we can improve lives for them. So the work that I've been involved with is very much about the here and now. Having said that, I've recently been working together with some other industry colleagues and together with Diabetes UK, looking at building a data repository. So looking at understanding how data can all be brought together in one place so that it can be used more effectively and more efficiently, and also to be combining different data sets, including real world evidence data. So that can be used to provide evidence either of perhaps new pathways or obviously of new clinical trial evidence coming through as well. So that's a very different example of how we might work together at different stages of the pathway. So yeah, all of them, I think.
Thanks, Catherine. And Miles, have you got anything to add from that, from kind of your perspective, or maybe kind of things that internally you kind of talk about as being a priority?
For sure. So I'll take it from a slightly more clinical perspective. For me, it's bringing any solutions across the entire chain that can really improve patient outcomes. And for me, a lot of that means having some form of validation that it is working. And there's a number of reasons for that. We can't just be giving things to people that we don't know have the correct impact that we want them to have. So there's the safety piece. There's also this trust piece around physicians and patients not going to engage with solutions unless you can prove to them this is a better way of doing it, or this improves outcomes in some mean. And sometimes that's lost, I think, a little bit in digital health. Not all aspects in any way, shape or form, and some of it's very difficult to do. Like drug discovery, for example, it's a very difficult area within the pharma chain to try and actually demonstrate that it works, because in my point of view, we need to wait 5 or 10 years until we can see which ones have actually got market authorization to see how accurate the prediction was to actually get there, if that makes sense. But there's a lot of piece there, and yes, of course, anything that's going to help the business model, anything that's going to help our patients. But we need to be thinking much more around how do we validate these solutions? How do we know that they're working? How do we continuously improve on that? How do we bring in a much more data-driven solution? And one of my big theories around where pharma will or needs to go eventually is moving away from being just drug deliverers, but being more service providers. In other words, creating more services around the products that we're offering to increase more value for the system, for the patients, for physicians. And that in its own right creates more opportunities and more solutions, and it makes for a better healthcare system. I think we're a long way off certain elements of it, but we're seeing some nice examples. And again, it has a very heavy clinical validations focus.
Thanks, Miles. We've got one more question, but I'd love to hear if Naj or Daniel have anything to add to that before we move on to it.
Yeah, no, I would just add, I think taking a stepwise approach really is also really important, of building the value up slowly. Neil's kindly put into the chat a link to innovators guide that BI has just actually yesterday launched, and is available in the public domain to help guide people on those various innovators on those various stages as they go through their journey. And it's really sharing a lived experience from UK innovators who've learned the painful way and are sharing some of their knowledge. And so I think I just draw people's attention to that as well in the chat.
Thanks, Naj, and congratulations on the launch yesterday. How exciting. And Daniel, any final thoughts on this question for you?
So yeah, one sentence, I think patient experience is critical, because you can innovate across the whole patient journey, and you can try to address multiple things: supply clinical trials, speed of clinical trials, but what in the patient journey is arriving at patient level, and how the patient experience this is critical for me. You can do a lot of clinical trials, but the CRFs, for instance, in a clinical trial can be can be very, very different depending on what you ask as feedback from patient advocacy groups, etc. So to give one example, just one sentence to add, patient experience is critical.
Brilliant, thank you. That's a really great summary, and I'll round up after this final question. But I think it would be really nice. So on Bob, one of our final questions that we ask our authors is kind of, what was the proudest moment of your project? You know, what's the thing that makes you feel really good about the thing you worked on? So I'd like to ask you all, what projects have you been most proud of in vein of what we've been talking about today?
So I can start. You know, I gave it already. I alluded already a couple of times to it. So the markets, together with startups, small, medium-sized companies, worked very hard and really brought Haya in 4 to 5 months to the markets. And that's kudos to all markets, kudos to all partners, but also scientific societies, patient advocacy groups who gave us this very, very valid feedback in order to what we discussed, address the minimal viable product, make it better, adding features, making the platform better, single interface to connect HCPs, patients, and the whole healthcare ecosystem. So that's a project where I'm particularly proud of, especially to the teams implementing it in market.
That sounds like a great team effort. Thanks, Daniel. And Catherine, any thoughts from you before I know you have to nip off at 3?
Yeah, thank you. Apart from the one that I mentioned, which was the NHS Diabetes Helpline, one thing which might sound a rather strange thing to say, but actually we supported one person, a single person in a startup that in fact was so early on in his career that he hadn't thought of a name for his company, actually called it his postcode because he couldn't think of what to call it. So he was a real one-man band, but he had this great idea that has taken a bit of a stall this year. It's about supporting people with insulin who it's about insulin passports and having an electronic digital version of an insulin passport. But it's just about being able to support one person to be able to take their idea that's a good one to a different level. And I think industry can support in a number of different ways. And it's not just about funding. It is about pooling of expertise, but actually it's about providing visibility as well to the right people so that we're able to support him to actually move to the next level. So I know it's only a tiny example, but I think sometimes those small examples are also really important. So that's what I'll just leave with.
Definitely. And I think with some of these smaller companies like ourselves, it is those things that seem very small, but it does mean a world, and it can be a game changer on these journeys. So thank you for sharing, Catherine. And Miles, will head to you. That's okay. Take care, Catherine.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you later, Catherine.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I'll keep mine relatively brief without going into too much detail. I think it's exactly what Catherine has described. It's working together to actually get that end goal, helping someone, however that is, however broad it is. When you actually get to that point, you realize, oh, like, wow, we've actually had an impact to this individual or this group of people in a way in which we wouldn't have been able to do this a few years ago. And we wouldn't have been able to do it on our own. And perhaps this company that we're working with may not have been able to do it as quickly if they didn't work with us. So it just kind of shows that by taking that approach, you can get these sort of solutions to people faster that actually starts having that impact and improving those outcomes. And that's critical to me. And whenever it gets there, you're just like, okay, that's why I love digital health.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks, Miles. And Nad, any final thoughts from you on that?
Yeah, so I think really carrying on the idea that, you know, there's a world of really fantastic innovators out there. And for us at BI, one of the things that we're really proud of being able to do is to help support them on their journey. So the guide is one example of that, but we also are supporting the Digital Health London Digital Pioneers programme. So that's NHS innovators that have got the ideas. And as a company, I think we can share and mentor a lot. But one of the really proudest moments I had this year was doing a programme of grassroots mentoring for the Crick Institute with their cohort of pioneers, and just blown away by the passion and dedication of people out there trying to make a difference. Pharma companies, we also have a role in which we can support SMEs just by sharing our knowledge and our experience, and help them go on to do great things.
Thanks, Nad, and it's a really lovely note to end the session on. And I think the take home is that the collaboration and the kind of cross-industry learning is a really important point. And I think just to wrap up on some of the advice that that you gave to some of the smaller companies listening in, it's kind of have a really tailored approach. So kind of having a look around and research at some of the challenges that you can get involved in, having a collaborative approach, and I think from a pharma side as well, it's kind of being open-minded, as Miles, I think you were touching on, and focusing on the patient experience, and also not looking for that full and final product, but working together collaboratively. So I think we're coming up to the end of our time, and if the team are listening, I'm sure they won't thank me for this, but I'm going to commit to it in front of so many witnesses. But we were planning to write a report on that kind of summarise some of the themes we've spoken about across our 2 days at Giant. And I think given today's conversations, that's definitely something to kind of watch this space, and we'd love to do. And appreciate we kind of got cut off a bit at the start, so our apologies, but we'll try and get a summary written up and sharing some of the great stuff we've spoken about. So I'd really like to thank Miles, Daniel, Naj, Catherine and Conrad, who I think we lost halfway through, unfortunately. And thank you for joining. That's it from here. Neil will be joining Hugh McCackey, the National Director of Improvement for NHS England and Improvement, and Rob Berry from Kent AHSN. That's at 3:45, and they'll be talking about driving improvement and innovation adoption to achieve spread and scale. So that's it from this session. A huge thank you to our speakers and to everyone listening.